Hey team, Yasin here, and in this training, we're going to be going over defining your version 1.0 self. Now, I'm really pumped for this series of trainings as we close out module number 2, is because now that we have completed all of the foundations inside of module number 2, right? We talked about the 5 problems of society. We are now going into the practical and the tactical part of this module, because without the foundations that we spoke about inside of this module, what would happen would be that your current paradigm would actually fight to not be changed. What your current paradigm would tell me if I didn't go ahead and break those foundations for you via the rest of this module was you would tell me, hey, no, my identity is fixed. No, my process for transformation should happen this way. No, my beliefs are really actually reality. Hey, no, I am my thoughts and emotions, right? And so now that you have a better understanding of identity and being and becoming and beliefs and consciousness and choice and change, what that means is that your mind is now primed and ready to be reprogrammed, right? We are now ready to jump into the practical part of this training and really start creating your new identity and creating your version 2.0 self, okay? So this training right here is going to be the critical step number 1 that is going to allow us to be able to get to the point that we can create your new identity. So it is in these next few trainings where we are really in the home stretch of now building that new version of ourselves that is going to ultimately create our dream life. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. And of course, I'm sure I don't have to go ahead and remind you why all of this is important and why all of this applies to you making money is because of the fact that if you were the version of yourself that was capable of making $5, $10, $15, $20, $30,000 a month online, then I'm going to go ahead and remind you, you would already be doing it. And so the reason that you do not have that reality inside of your life right now is because you are not yet the version that is able to do that. You are not yet the version that is able to create effortlessly your dream life. Okay, so I'm not going to have to remind you over and over and over again why this is important and why we are doing this. Do not half-ass this process. I'm telling you, it's absolutely critical. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the very first thing that we're going to be talking about inside of this training is going to be a new way of seeing yourself. Now, you're going to be familiar with this new way of seeing yourself because we spoke about it briefly when we spoke about it inside of the prisoner of thoughts and emotions training, right? We talked about how you must master your limbic self, otherwise it is going to run you, right? This is the new way that you need to start to see yourself by separating yourself from your version 1.0 self. You need to start seeing yourself as a character, as a puppet that you can control. And what is that puppet, right? It's kind of like this is the version of you that is consciously observing the character, and that character is the subconscious limbic self, part of yourself that actually takes automatic reactions, okay? And so you have to start to see yourself as the version that is actually controlling that character. And what that means is that what you're doing is you're learning to observe yourself. You're learning to observe your 1.0 version character, okay? And most importantly, what that means is that you are the master of that character. You are the one that gives orders to it and you tell it how to behave, okay? And so from this training going forward, it's going to be absolutely critical for you to start separating yourself from this character, okay? Because there is that character, aka your version 1.0 self, and then there is you, aka your conscious self. And so the conscious self is the one that is going to pull the strings and tell the character to dance and tell the character what to do, okay? And so by seeing yourself in this way, you can really start to more easily mold and shape your identity to the person that you need to become in order to be able to create your dream life effortlessly. And like we learned about, unfortunately, for most of society, what they're actually doing is that they actually have their character controlling them, right? Their automatic limbic subconscious self is the one that is pulling all of the strings, right? They let their version 1.0 character self decide who they are and what is actually going to happen, okay? And so the very first part of what we are calling the becoming process, because that's what I'm doing here, is I'm opening your eyes to what we call the becoming process inside of these last few trainings inside of this module. And so the very first step of this becoming process is this, which is that you have to start to create that separation between your version 1.0 identity and self and your conscious self, right? You have to be able to control it, because ultimately, remember, I want to go ahead and remind you of this, is that it is your version 1.0 self that is responsible for creating your current situation. Like I was saying earlier, if you were somebody else, you would have a different situation. You would have a different reality. And so the reason you are in your situation right now, the reason why you have your occupation, you have your body, you have your living situation, you have your house, you have your apartment, you have your whatever, your financial situation, your relationships, all of that is a responsibility of who? Of that version 1.0 self, which is you. But now we know more because we're now educated, so that way it doesn't feel like an offensive attack. It's more so a responsibility of, now that we're separating that character, a responsibility of that version 1.0 subconscious limbic self, right? And so we have to kind of control him or her. We have to master him or her. And so we must really start to define this version 1.0 identity and really start to get a good idea of who this character is, so that we can work to start transforming this character, okay? So the next question that you might have is, okay, Yasin, how do I actually create that separation? And so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and give you a couple mental models, a couple mental frameworks that are going to kind of allow you to more easily create that separation. So the very first mental model that is going to be extremely useful for you as you start to create that separation between yourself and this character is really starting to see yourself more so in the third person view rather than seeing yourself in the first person view, okay? Because when you're in the first person view, you're looking through the lens of the character, versus when you are in the third person view, you are more so looking from afar on what the character is doing, right? And so in the first person view, it's about the limbic self-controlling, versus in the third person view, it's about the conscious self-controlling, right? First person view is limbic, conscious, this is limbic mode, this is observer mode, this is being in your thoughts, versus this is observing your thoughts and emotions, okay? So this is really how you should start to see yourself. And when you're seeing yourself like this, what you are doing is you are in observer mode. And if you remember from the training about being a prisoner to your thoughts and emotions, really this observer mode is the key, because it's what allows us to be in complete control. And so whenever you find yourself in a situation where there's a lot of emotion, where there's a lot of pain, what you have to do is you have to cultivate that skill of separating yourself from the character, right? Becoming the observer of the character rather than being in the character. Versus when we are stuck being the character, right? When we're in first person view, when we're in limbic mode, right? What ends up happening is that we are viewing life and reality as the character. We are viewing it from its eyes, right? And then when we are inside of the character, it becomes difficult for us to be able to control ourselves because we're so caught up in our emotions and our thoughts, right? But when we step out of the character, when we go into conscious mode, when we go into that third person view, then you can start to observe and control your character like you would a video game player. And so an example that I do like to go ahead and say is, this was something that was very amazing for me when I first started cultivating this skill set of seeing myself as a third person character. Was I remember one time I was on 2 hours of sleep and I was in a very difficult, tight deadline, right? And so whenever I find myself in a similar hard or painful situation, like running on only 2 hours of sleep, and then all of a sudden I have the entire day ahead of me, right? Or maybe even worse than that, I've had to stay up all night. What I do is I realize that, man, there's a lot of pain and a lot of tiredness inside of the situation, right? And so what I will do is I will step outside of myself and I will tell my character, nope, hey, you're going to do as I say today, and you're not going to have any fear. You're going to go ahead and go into the battle of the day. You're going to attack this day, and you got this, right? And so I talk to my character, I talk to myself, the limbic self, the subconscious self, who has that fear, who's a little bit more emotional, who gets wrapped up in those thoughts, right? And I talk to it as if I'm a third party perspective on here. And it's extremely, extremely, extremely powerful. Another frame that is extremely powerful is what I call the mentor frame, right? As the third person view, what you're doing is you're viewing yourself as someone else, like a friend or a mentor would do. and you're viewing yourself externally, okay? And you can kind of imagine, even for yourself, how much easier is it to be able to find faults of someone else? How much easier is it to be able to give advice to someone else? How much easier is it that you know what somebody else should do in their life and what they need to do in their life in order to get the result? But sometimes they're just not able to do it because they're stuck in being that first person view, right? Versus when you go into third person view, it's almost like you can see yourself as that third party perspective and everything becomes a lot more clear, right? This is the power that you can tap into for yourself when you view yourself as the third party perspective, as a third person view. And so this is how, as you cultivate this skill of seeing yourself as a character, as a third party perspective, as a third person, you're going to start to become better and better and better at this. And then that way you can start to find faults in yourself. You can start to see where you need to improve, right? Not faults so you beat yourself up, but more so faults so you can start to improve. Now, the next part about all of this is going to be really talking about what happens if your version 1.0 character, what happens if your version 1.0 identity is too strong, right? And what happens many times, especially for you as you are going through this process for the first time, as you're going through the becoming process for the first time, what ends up happening is that a lot of times our version 1.0 character and identity is extremely, extremely strong and has been ingrained because of so much programming and conditioning from society. What it does is it actually starts to fight back, okay? And what ends up happening is that when we try to tell it what to do, it ends up actually trying to fight us back, right? And this is what it looks like when society has told Larry, hey, Larry, this is who you are for so long. Larry starts to see it as a part of his identity. He's unable to separate himself from his identity. And so the very first time that Larry goes through the becoming process, what's going to happen is that his identity is going to be very strong. He has too much attachment to his identity. He has too much identification to his identity, right? And so what it ends up doing is it actually ends up fighting back. It says, no, this is the way that I am. Right? And this is because society's paradigm has never talked to us about the becoming process. We ourselves are not used to transforming and evolving our identity consciously. Maybe unconsciously, we've had to do it in other parts of our life, but we've never done it consciously, right? And so the first time that we begin the process of transforming and evolving our identity, many students can find it extremely challenging because of the fact that their identity is not yet moldable, okay? It's actually ended up becoming cemented from the lack of evolution that they've had in their entire life, okay? And so the more identity evolution cycles that we go through, it actually ends up becoming easier for us to be able to transform our lives because of the fact that we are more used to the becoming process, and the entire thing becomes so much easier. Right? Now, what does this mean for you going through this process, right? For you, most likely, this is the first time that you are going through the becoming process consciously. And so what we're going to have to do is we're actually going to have to do some extra work to go ahead and break that current version 1.0 identity so that way it can be prepared to transform, okay? So how do we actually deal with that character who does not want to submit? What do we do with that character, right? And what we do is we actually go through an activity that you're going to be going through later on inside of this training where we talk about breaking the current character, right? When that character gets too strong, when it starts to try to fight back, what we go ahead and do is we go ahead and break that character. We go ahead and show it that it's not invincible, right? And so we do is we go ahead and break that version 1.0 identity. And what does it mean when we say break, right? It might sound a little bit aggressive. What does that actually mean? What that means is that we do something that is completely out of character for that version 1.0 self, right? Something that that version 1.0 self would hate, something that it would fear, right? And when we do this, what we are doing is we are sending the message to our version 1.0 self and its identity that we are the ones that are in control and not it, okay? That it does not have the power to decide who we are. We, aka our conscious self, is the one that decides. And so when we do an activity to really break the old character's identity, right? When we do something that is out of character that the version 1.0 identity would never do, it really starts to shake the foundations of that 1.0 character and that identity, and it really starts to crack who it thinks it is. And then once that identity is broken, we can then start the process of shifting and changing and molding that identity because it's no longer as cemented as it was before. Let me go ahead and give you a couple examples of what this would look like practically, just so that way it doesn't sound overly aggressive or you're like, what is this whole thing about breaking my identity? Let me go ahead and give you an example so that way it kind of resonates a little bit more, okay? So for me, myself, for 25 years of my life, I considered myself to be a night owl, okay? There was no way ever that I was ever going to be able to focus in the mornings, right? I literally just could not get myself to do it. I would always sleep at around 12 or 1 a.m. every single night, right? And then every time that I tried to go to sleep early, and for me, early was like 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., what would happen was that my current character self would scream and dig his claws in and say, nope, this is not us. This is not what we do. You are not that kind of person. This is not who I am. This is simply not what I do, right? This is what it would scream over and over and over again. It would overwhelm me with thoughts and emotions. It would help me procrastinate. All of a sudden, that thing that I saw on YouTube is so much more interesting. And all of a sudden, it would really start to sabotage me. And so every time that I tried to go to bed early, it would kick and scream and really just overpower me. And then one day, I started to get randomly tired. I went to the gym early that day. I started to get a little bit tired around like 6 p.m., right? For some reason. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to break this character. And I did the unthinkable. I went to bed at 7:30 p.m. Like I literally just turned off my brain. I did not let my current version 1.0 self's noise get to me. And I just did it. I just went to sleep at 7:30. And then I woke up and I didn't just stop there. Check this out. I woke up at 2 a.m. and I felt great. Right? I woke up naturally. I didn't have an alarm. I just woke up. And then I woke up and guess what I did? I just started working. And then I worked from like 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. and I had literally gotten a full 8 hours workday in the morning, literally before most people had even gotten up, right? And then by the time 6 p.m. started rolling around, I started feeling tired again because I'd been up for 16 hours at that time, 2 a.m. to 6 p.m., right? And then what I did was I just did it again. I just went to sleep at 7:30. And then after a while, I did that for 2 nights in a row. And literally, it was like something went off in my head. It was like my version 2.0 character identity just broke, right? It was completely out of character for it, that it didn't understand what was going on, right? My identity had completely broken. It used to think that going to sleep at 9 p.m. was early. And then this guy over here is going to sleep at 7:30. Like, what in the world, right? And so all of a sudden, my entire identity was questioned. It was broken. And then now, really up to today, my preferred sleep schedule is to go to bed around 8 p.m. and I typically will wake up around 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. and I will do that every single day, and it has become a part of my identity, and it all started from me breaking the character on that one day. Another example that I want to give you to really hit this concept home is a example of someone that you might recognize, and this is Coach Malik Muhammad, and this is the story of Muhammad's beard, okay? And this is going to be very interesting for you because this is exactly what Muhammad had to do in order for himself to be able to evolve from his current version 1.0 self to becoming someone who could make millions of dollars online when he moved from California to Texas, right? Because when I first met him, right, he had this massive beard right here. He had this massive beard, okay? And it was really a part of his identity. Like, he truly believed that if he shaved it off, that he would lose a part of who he was, right? And when I talked to him, he was committed to breaking his version 1.0 self, that it was so difficult for him that he literally went to the barber. He sat in the chair. He said, no, I can't do this. He got out. He walked outside. He called me 3 times and he kept telling me, hey, Yasin, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this, right? I feel this is wrong, right? My family, and his family believes that having a beard is a part of their faith. He said, my family's going to disown me, right? But then I assured him, I said, yo, it's okay. It's going to be okay. This is a part of your version 1.0 self-identity, kicking and screaming to survive, right? And so as a result, he was able to go ahead and go through it. And then surprise, surprise, his family did not disown him. And he was actually able to go ahead and set the stage for him to evolve from his version 1.0 self and then be able to go to his version 2.0 self. Okay, so that's another example. And then to really hit this home, I want to go ahead and give you a third example. This is going to be a quick one. And this is kind of like something I did with somebody who really identified as a rule follower. Okay, and this person's version 1.0 character could literally never imagine breaking rules. They said, nope, I'm just a rule follower. That's what I do. And so how we break this person's character is we go ahead and tell that person to say, hey, tell yourself, I love breaking rules. And then go out and break some harmless rules, like taking off the tag from the mattress, right? I don't know if you know this, but there's some crazy, like super outdated law that says that you cannot remove legally tags from mattresses. I don't know why. I don't know why it exists. Even after you've purchased them, why does it matter? But for this person, it was extremely valuable for them to go out and do something that was out of character for them. So that way they were able to break their character and set the stage for them to be able to become their version 2.0 self, okay? And so really the bottom line that what we're talking about here, when we're talking about breaking the character, is we're really showing that version 1.0 identity that it can be shaken, that it can be changed, right? Because a lot of times for those who are not used to changing their identity, that identity kind of gets cemented after a while, right? And so what we're doing is we're priming everything to get ready for transformation. And then really the ultimate end goal that we are pursuing with all of this is that what we're doing is we're really reprogramming the identity to do whatever we want it to do, right? Because like we learned, our new identity is going to require for us to be able to have a new paradigm. It's going to require for us to be able to have different beliefs. And then it is going to be those paradigms and those beliefs that we have that is going to ultimately create our reality, right? And so what we're doing is we are consciously breaking the character and becoming someone else consciously, right? This is what we call the becoming process, right? It's also known as identity shifting. And so what eventually starts to happen through repetition of breaking that current version 1.0 self and choosing new actions, beliefs, and thoughts is that version 1.0 identity, it starts to submit. It starts to get ready for transformation. And then with enough repetition, we start to teach our subconscious identity these new standards of behavior, these new standards of thinking. And then what you're going to end up realizing, as you're going to learn in the upcoming trainings, is that we can then start to design this new version 2.0 self. We can start the process of what this next level in our life is going to look like. So let's go ahead and talk about what that is, right? Let's go ahead and talk about the overview of the becoming process. Okay, let's go ahead and really get to the nuts and the meat and potatoes over here, right? So remember what we talked about in the dark force holding you back? We talked about where you are right now is not going to be the person that is going to be the same person who achieves what it is that you want, right? And a lot of people misunderstand this, right? They think, okay, cool, I'm gonna go out and make $1 million. But that's not how it actually works. They say, cool, you know what? I'm gonna stay the same version of myself. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna make $1 million, right? I'm gonna go ahead and achieve that. When in reality, what you actually have to do, we've already talked about this, is just a quick recap. What you actually have to do is you have to become the person who is worthy of $1 million, the thought patterns, the habits, the behaviors, the actions, the decisions, and then $1 million will come and find you. And so what we're doing is we're focusing on becoming the desired self, right? We're going from being our current self to being our desired self, right? Because at the end of the day, remember, it is you, your current self, that has created your situation. It's not your past, it's not your skills, it's not your parents, it's not your family, it's not your lack of time. All of that is just an excuse. At the end of the day, it is you, your current self, that is responsible for creating your current situation, right? We have to recognize that it's nobody else except ourselves. It was your current identity, your current paradigm, that was responsible for creating your current situation. And the issue that most people run into when they go ahead and try to achieve their desired situation as their version 1.0 self is that, okay, they got their version 1.0 self here, and they're going ahead and saying, cool, I'm going to go ahead and achieve this desired situation as my version 1.0 self. And they go ahead and force themselves to do this. They go ahead and really push themselves. And maybe they start to see a twinkle of hope that their desired situation is coming to fruition. And then boom, they get slingshotted back to their current situation. And so they end up in this roller coaster, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, being slingshot. And they're saying, cool, you know, this time is going to be different. I'm going to push myself, version 1.0 self, to achieve this desired situation. And it never actually works out that way. Remember, you have to become someone else, aka your version 2.0 self, right? And then that version 2.0 self is going to effortlessly create the desired situation, right? And so in order to create your desired situation, you have to become someone different. And this other person, right? This other version of yourself has that version 2.0 identity, has that version 2.0 paradigm. And then as a result, they're easily going to be able to create that desired reality. And so that's why I like to use these different terms. Sometimes I say current self, sometimes I say desired self, sometimes I say version 1.0 self, sometimes I say version 2.0 self, sometimes I say current situation or current reality or desired situation or desired reality, right? The reason I say these because I want to really hit this abstract concept. I know very few people in your life have ever talked to you about this, if anybody. And that's why it's a very abstract concept that I'm trying to go ahead and simplify for you. And so that's why I want to go ahead and hit it from different terms so that way it's easier for you to be able to understand, okay? And so the next part I want to go ahead and explain to you about the becoming process is that this becoming process is not something that is static and is not something that happens only once. The process of self-evolution, of constantly becoming another version of ourselves in order to create our desired reality, it's a never-ending process in life. Because what happens is that we are our version 1.0 self, we become our version 2.0 self, and we attain that desired situation. But then we don't only stop there, because what happens is that that version 2.0 self ends up becoming the new status quo because of the upper limit problem and homeostatic impulse, right? And then all of a sudden, now that we are that version 1.0 self, we have that current situation, which used to be our desired situation, we have to now evolve again. And then when we evolve again, that evolution that we had now becomes the baseline, and then we have to evolve again. And so this is the process of self-evolution for different seasons of life. Now, most people are doing this unconsciously, right? They have no idea who they are becoming in life, right? They just end up staying where they are at for the most part, or they end up becoming someone that they don't even recognize, and they end up getting the same outcomes in the same situation because they've never evolved. When in reality, what I want to explain to you inside of this training is that there are seasons of life, and that every season of life is going to require a different version of you, okay? So different versions of you for different seasons of life, okay? This is how the top people, the top performers, the people that you look up to, this is how they live their life. Every time they want to make a change in their life, right? Or a change is happening in their life, they evolve themselves, right? Me personally, all of my personal business and life success has always happened through evolving myself, through breaking my character, that is my version 1.0 character, and replacing it with a new character that is capable of achieving bigger goals. This is the secret. This is what you must do in order to evolve yourself at every stage in life, okay? And the most important thing is that you have to make sure that you are doing this consciously and proactively, so that way you can stay in control of your life and you can create the reality that you want and create the world that you want, okay? And so this is ultimately what all of this is about. And like we talked about, every single time that you evolve, that homeostatic impulse, right, that hedonic treadmill is going to really make that your new normal, okay? And then all of a sudden, that becomes your new version 1.0 self. And this is really what it looks like, is that you have a season of life, and in that season of life, you evolve from your version 1.0 self and your current situation, and then you evolve to your version 2.0 self, and you attain your desired situation. But then after a while of being in that season of life, then that version 2.0 is now your version 1.0. And now you're in a new season of life, and you got to become a new version of yourself. And then that new version of yourself, because of the hedonic treadmill and because of the homeostatic impulse, that becomes the new version 1.0. And then there's another season of life, and then you got to evolve again. And this entire process happens over and over and over again until we are no longer. And so this is how literally the becoming process dictates every different season in our life, every single different chapter in our life, okay? And this entire process is what we call the becoming cycle, or the cycle of becoming. This is the behind the scenes of the becoming process, right? And as your eyes start to open up more so to the becoming process, right? You're going to start to look back at your life, and you're going to realize, like, man, I've been stuck being the version 1.0 of myself for a very long time now, right? Because when we were younger, these evolutions in life actually happened to us, and they used to happen faster, right? We used to move from elementary school to middle school. Boom, there's a trigger to evolve. We used to move from middle school to high school. Boom, there's a trigger to evolve. We move from high school to college. Evolve. We move from college to our job. Evolve, right? Move out from our parents' home for the first time. Evolve. But then as we get older, these forced evolutions by life, they don't happen as often, right? And instead, they only happen at major moments in our life, right? And so as a result, hey, I got married, time to evolve. I had my first child, time to evolve. Death of a parent or a close one, time to evolve. And so this really is the problem with society and the becoming process, is that most people, they go through these forced evolutions, right? We talked about going through high school and college and, getting married and all this kind of stuff. They go through these forced evolutions in life, and they don't actually control who they become as a result of these seasons, and they haphazardly just become somebody, right? They don't control that process. And then the second problem with all of this is that it leads to stagnant behavior because in adult life, we don't have a lot of those forced evolution moments anymore, right? And so then not only did they not control who they were becoming at those important junctions in life, that's number one. And then number two, on top of that, there are no other forced moments because as you get older, these forced moments of change become less and less. And so as a result, they don't actually have any more change going on in their life. They're not actually evolving. They're stuck being the same person that they've always been. And so those who are the most successful in the world and in life, instead of reacting to life, they are creating their life by consciously deciding what they want and who they need to become. What they are doing is they are creating that reality for themselves, okay? And so in other words, they do not wait for life-induced forced evolutions. They force self and paradigm evolution upon themselves consciously, okay? And they do this via this scientific process that we have coined the becoming process, which is what you are learning right now, because this is the cycle of becoming, right? Your version 1.0 self, and then you become your version 2.0 self. Then your version 2.0 self becomes your version 1.0 self, and you got to evolve again. And so whenever you feel like you're stuck in life, it's because you haven't yet evolved to the next version of yourself. And so this really is the power of what it is that we are doing in the rest of this module, because now that you have that foundational understanding of the big 5 problems of society, now you have a foundational understanding of the becoming process. It's now time for us to start that becoming process for you. And how we're going to start this becoming process for you is starting off by going over and defining your version 1.0 self. And how we're going to do this is via something called the Defining Your Version 1.0 Self worksheet, okay? And so the very first step to the becoming process is to define your current identity and the current version of yourself, okay? Because what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pin down and get a clear idea of who we are right now. We're going to go ahead and get a brutally honest snapshot of the character that is responsible for your current situation, okay? And remember, it is the version 1.0 self and only the version 1.0 self that is responsible for creating your current situation, okay? Where you are in life right now is a result of nobody except your version 1.0 self. And so this worksheet is going to really allow us to get a clear look in the mirror at this character. And remember, this is so important because what got you here will also keep you here, okay? And so we must go ahead and identify exactly who this version 1.0 character is, where they are right now, so that way we can then work to be able to transform this character, okay? And so this entire activity, what it's going to go ahead and do is going to go ahead and allow you to identify the dysfunctional patterns that are within your version 1.0 self, right? And I want you to remember, these are not who you are, okay? This is why I said we have to separate between you and the character, right? This is only what you have learned. This is what you've been programmed. This is what you have been conditioned to. It is not you. Do not take this personally. Some students sometimes get very emotional about this. They say, oh man, I must be broken. Hence the training that we made that says, don't declare yourself broken, right? And so that is one of the most important things to remember. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is I'm going to go ahead and pull up the worksheet that you're going to actually go through. I'm going to walk you through the worksheet step by step, and then I'm going to come back and explain some of the other important parts of the worksheet. But going ahead and explaining this right now won't make any sense because you don't have that visual for the worksheet. So I'm going to go ahead and cut over to a quick mini training about the actual Defining Your Version 1.0 Self worksheet. All right, welcome to the mini training about Defining Your Version 1.0 Self worksheet. So the very first thing that you're going to need to do before you can actually edit this worksheet is that you are going to make sure that you go over and open up the template and then hit on File and then click on Make a Copy, because the version that you are going to be looking at is going to only be the template. And so obviously we cannot allow thousands of students to edit the template. So you need to make sure that you make your own copy of the actual worksheet, okay? The next thing that's going to be very important to emphasize is that this entire worksheet is probably going to take multiple iterations over the course of an entire week, okay? And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that over the course of the entire week, you are noticing as much about your version 1.0 self as possible. It is going to be quite difficult to try and do this in one sitting. Try and do the most you can in one sitting, but then after a while, you're going to kind of hit a blockade and you're going to want to come back to this over time as well. So this worksheet is basically divided up into different sections, and these are different angles on which you are going to actually be trying to evaluate your version 1.0 self on these different factors, okay? So the very first one is going to be your current personality, okay? And so you can see here the instructions say that most people take personality tests to determine who am I, when in truth, your personality to a large degree changes significantly throughout your life. And so here at RWA, what we do is we take personality tests to assess who we are right now, and so that way we can determine who we must become. And one of the best personality tests that really changes throughout our life based on a number of factors is the Myers-Briggs personality test. It's very, very helpful and very insightful to determine who we need to become. Of course, that's not the way that most people use the Myers-Briggs, but that is the actual true way and the correct way to use it. So what you're going to do is you're going to go over to remotewellnessacademy.com/MBTI, right? Stands for Myers-Briggs Personality Assessment. And then you're going to go ahead and take the personality assessment that is on there, okay? You can also go ahead and open up this worksheet and click on the hyperlink that is there as well. Now, it's very important to note that the MBTI exists on a continuum. What that means is that the question is not, is my version 1.0 self's personality introverted or extroverted? It's more so, how introverted or extroverted is my version 1.0 self, right? How much introverted is my version 1.0 self, right? And so hence there are going to be percentages, and those percentages are going to be given to you at the end of this assessment. So make sure that when you actually take it, you actually don't like click away or anything like that. I think even the email that they send you does not have the percentages in there. And so you want to make sure that you take a lot of screenshots of that final screen once you do take that assessment. And then what you're going to do is you're going to come into this worksheet and you're going to put in here, what are the percentages, right? Is my introverted, am I or 20% introverted, 80% extroverted, right? Based off of what the assessment tells you. And so you're going to go ahead and literally just copy and paste whatever the assessment gives you, and you're going to put them on here. So that way you can start to get an idea of that continuum for these 4 different traits that are available. And then the assessment also does give you a good explanation of the different traits that are on here. Okay. So what you're doing is you're identifying the opposites and you're seeing, okay, what do I need to balance this equation out in order to achieve my dreams and my goals, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to try to go ahead and introduce more of these opposites in your life and in your business. So that way you can start to become aware of the problems that end up happening when you become too binary and jammed on one side of your current version 1.0 self, right? So if you're really introverted based off of the test, then you're going to make sure that your version 2.0 self, which is what we're going to talk about in the next training, actually introduces elements of extroversion, right? If you're really all about randomness and no rules, then you're going to want to make sure that you go ahead and implement sections of having rules in your life, right? If you're really all about thinking logical, rational, right? If that's the percentage based off the assessment, then you're going to want to make sure that your version 2.0 self is introducing more feeling and emotional elements, right? Same thing with judging and decisiveness, and then perceiving and indecisiveness as well. So that is how the MBTI works, and that's how you're going to go ahead and evaluate your current version 1.0 personality, okay? And then that way you can go ahead and mold it, right? All we're doing right now is assessing the current, so that way we can go ahead and evaluate the desired, okay? Then the next thing you're going to go ahead and see, hey, you know, what are my strengths and weaknesses for my version 1.0 self? You're going to go ahead and list 5 of them or more, right? Strengths and weaknesses, okay, of your version 1.0 self, your current character, okay? Then the next thing you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to evaluate, hey, what are some of the good and bad behaviors that I currently have, right? All of this is priming your brain to be able to separate yourself from that character and become your version 2.0 character, right? You're going to go ahead and evaluate, what is my current appearance, right? Go ahead and talk about, hey, how do I currently present myself? What kind of clothes do I currently wear? How do I currently walk? How do I interact with other people that are around me, right? What does all of that look like? You're going to go ahead and describe that in detail located here, okay? Next thing, you're going to say, hey, what is my current routine, right? What does it look like? What time do I wake up typically? What time do I go to sleep? What does that look like? What is my current vocabulary? What are some of the words and the labels that I currently use quite regularly, right? Then this is going to be a very important part right here, where you're going to start to identify what are some of the I am statements. What are the character traits that I have that are both empowering and disempowering, right? What are the current disempowering I am statements that I say about myself? What are the character traits that I embody? What are the character traits that I identify as, right? All of this, remember what you currently have, that is your current version 1.0 self. The reason I keep referring to it as current version 1.0 self is because I want you to kind of have that separation. But truthfully, this is who you are right now. And this is what you're doing, is you're painting a picture via this worksheet of who you are right now. Then you're going to go ahead and repeat that exact same process with your beliefs, right? What are the beliefs that you have right now? And what you want to do is you really want to kind of brainstorm as many as you can, and then really start to explore and identify as many of those beliefs as you can. And really you want to kind of have this bank of inventory of what are the disempowering beliefs that I currently have and what are the empowering beliefs that I currently have. Remember, this is not what you want. This is not the empowering beliefs that I want to have. This is what you have right now, okay? Same thing. What are the fears that you have right now? What are some of the preferences that you have right now in terms of what you love to do and that you're happy to do every single day? What are some of the things that you hate doing right now, right? List those down as well. What is your reputation? How is it that people would talk about you right now? What are some of those things that they would say? Now, remember, we are going to work on changing this, okay? This is not stuck in stone. So don't get very emotional about this. Don't get too caught up about this, right? We talked about the importance of learning to be able to identify the change. And some of that feels like, hey, this is a little bit mucky, right? I don't like what people say about me right now. It's okay. We're going to be working on transforming this as well, okay? And then next, we're going to be talking about your judgments, right? Right now, what are some of the judgments that you have, right? Because the instructions for this say, judging others makes it impossible to do anything bold yourself because of the fear that you will be judged, right? Because what you do is when you judge other people, and then when you do things that those other people are doing, you think that other people are going to think about you the same way that you think about them. And so what you got to do is you got to take a look right now and see, okay, what are the people and who are the people that I dislike and why, right? And that you got to have to start doing is you have to start making a conscious decision to stop judging them and start really at least not loving them. I mean, I know I put loving them in here inside of the training, but even if it's not loving them, but at least understanding their viewpoint and starting to agree with some parts of their viewpoint, right? You don't have to necessarily accept them completely, but you really have to start letting go of your judgments as well. So what you want to do here for this first section is first list out who are 3 people that you idolize, look up to, and admire. And then you want to say, hey, what are the traits, characteristics, and things that I look up to them for? Okay, that's number 1. And then the second part of this is who are 3 people that I despise, that I dislike, or think that are wrong? And you want to go ahead and list those 3 people or 3 types of people here. And then you want to go ahead and list over here is what is it about their character traits, their characteristics, or things that they've done that I dislike so much? And remember, what we're doing here is we're really starting to get down to, okay, hey, what is my current judgments, right? What my current version 1.0 self, what are the judgments that it makes? Because the judgments a lot of times are very revealing of who we are internally, okay? The next step we have on here is your current version 1.0 self, your current binaries, okay? Because the thing is that the way that you exist right now, like we talked about, it makes it impossible for you to achieve your dreams, right? Who you are right now can never achieve your dreams. You have to evolve, and that means you have to face the dark side of removing some of the assumptions that you have about your current mental programming. And so what that means is that you are going to have to face some of the opposite binaries of who you consider yourself to be in order to actually become. And so what you want to do is you want to go down into this section and you want to start to circle what part of the spectrum right now you would identify with the most, right? Are you more about logic or are you more about intuition? Are you tight with your money or are you loose with your money, right? So you say, cool, I'm logic, I'm loose with my money, I'm more masculine, am I disciplined or go with the flow? I'm more disciplined, I'm more sensible, I'm typically more disorganized right now, I'm typically more shy, I'm typically more logic and precise, more like nature, a little bit more serious, I really like more of like healthy food, more of a night owl. Right now I identify with science, I'm really into money and worldly objects. I'm more about giving to others. I think more about my past. And then if I scroll down here, I'm also more like loud. And then I'm also more understated. I don't like to be bold, right? I don't know how that would go together, but this is just an example. And so what you're doing through this section of this worksheet is you're really starting to identify the binaries that you kind of lean towards. So that way you understand that, okay, you know what? I'm going to have to start to explore in my version 2.0 self some of the opposites of this binary. Because if I don't explore some of the opposites of this binary, then I'm not going to be able to mold my identity to who it is that I want to become. Okay, so that really is the defining your version 1.0 self worksheet. It's really targeting who you are right now and getting it on paper from many different angles, so that way we can start to be able to really mold this character and this identity inside of the upcoming trainings after we get a clear snapshot via this worksheet of who we are right now. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and hop back over to the main training. All right, welcome back. So that was the mini training that was describing the defining your version 1.0 self worksheet, okay? Now, one thing that I do want to go ahead and emphasize is that one of the most important sections inside of that worksheet is going to be the identity statements and the beliefs part of that worksheet, okay? Because ultimately, these are the two pieces that are at the core of what makes up your current paradigm. Because ultimately, your identity statements, what those are they are your character traits that you believe about yourself, right? And so what you want to do is you want to make sure inside of that worksheet that you are spending a lot of time identifying those character traits, those identity statements, and those beliefs. And you will probably need to have more space than what is available inside of that worksheet. So if you got to go ahead and add to that document, if you got to add another page, so be it, right? Because if you are walking around thinking to yourself, hey, I'm not patient enough, I can't sit down long enough to read a book, I get easily distracted, I have difficulty focusing, I have a lot of insecurities, I have a lot of anger, I'm someone who gets a lot of anxiety, right? I have a lot of trauma, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at numbers. All of these are things that you must identify and put inside of that worksheet. And you have to make sure that you are taking the time to do so. And so really just dump out all of the character traits and the things that you define yourself, okay? And the reason why this is going to be important is because you really need to make sure that you unload as many as you can, so that way we can start to reprogram them inside of the next training, okay? So same thing for beliefs as well. Now, as you are noticing, this is going to take some work from you. And it is going to maybe take you more than a week in order to actually put all of this together, because some of these exercises, they don't just come down in one sitting, right? If you sit down and try to think to yourself, what are all of the character traits, the false beliefs, the identity statements that I make about myself, maybe nothing's going to come. What you might need is a whole week's worth of data in order to be able to figure some of this stuff out. Because if you try to sit down and think, what are my beliefs? Maybe nothing's going to come up, right? But when you go through your normal life over the course of the week and you go through everything day to day, then all of a sudden you're like, something did come up, and then you can jot it in your phone, you can jot it down on a notepad or whatever that might be, and you can really start to document it over the course of the entire week, right? This is how you do this activity properly, right? And you will want to go ahead and make sure that you get the most out of this activity, and you do not want to half-ass it, because if you half-ass it, you're going to get a half-assed outcome, okay? So this is going to be very important to make sure that you do this properly. The next activity that you're going to be going into after that is going to be the breaking your version 1.0 character identity activity, okay? And so we talked a little bit about this already, and we talked about the importance of breaking your version 1.0 identity. And so this activity is really just putting that concept into an actionable activity. And what we're going to be doing is we're really going to start to do things that are different from our current identity, just so that way we can start to prove to ourselves that our identity is moldable. But before I show you how we're going to do this activity, I do want to go ahead and emphasize, some of you, as you go through this activity, you're going to feel like you are losing a part of yourself. It's going to feel like you're losing someone. It's going to feel like a part of you is dying, okay? And I want to go ahead and explain something to you, so that way it makes this process a little bit easier, so that way it doesn't feel as painful as you are starting to shift your identity. Because I want you to remember that nobody ever created anything beautiful in their lives without sacrifice, okay? When you go to the gym in order to get fit and have an athletic body, you are sacrificing your favorite food and your free time. When you spend 10 hours a day working on your business and your career, you are sacrificing time that could be spent with your family and friends. And so this is a quote that I want you to remember through this process, is that if you do not sacrifice for your dreams, then your dreams will become the sacrifice, okay? Here's another one that I really love, is that for a seed to achieve its greatest expression, It must first become completely undone. The shell must crack, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone that does not understand growth, this entire process looks and feels like complete destruction. And so when it's time to grow, it doesn't feel good, right? The emotions are very difficult to deal with. It feels like there's death and destruction that's happening. But at the end of the day, maybe we've just actually misunderstood it, right? This is really the process of birth and becoming new. And it does feel difficult because, as you're going to learn in upcoming trainings, this process has both death and birth in it. And so it's almost like you have to go and experience the process of death, aka losing someone, and birth, psychological child labor, in order to be successful with this, right? And so sometimes it is difficult. It's going to be a part of the process. And so that's why I wanted to pre-frame this before I go into the breaking your identity activity, because of the fact that it is going to be painful for some of you to go through this activity, but it's going to be absolutely critical, and you're going to be so happy that you did it, because this is what is required in order for you to be able to become the version of yourself that achieves your ultimate dream life. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and cut over to another mini training that is going to quickly go over the breaking your version 1.0 identity activity. And that's going to go ahead and explain to you all of the instructions for that. All right, welcome to the Breaking Your Version 1.0 Identity activity. Now, this is a very fun activity, and even though breaking sounds very aggressive, I want you to really just have fun with this, because it really is about having fun. It's not about trying to get all serious and, get all sad because you're losing a part of your identity or anything like that, or being scared or fearful or any of that. It's really just a fun activity, a playful activity. And what we are doing inside of this activity is really preparing ourselves to become our version 2.0 selves. And this means doing something that our version 1.0 self, aka us, right now would never do, right? So what we got to do inside of this activity is we're going to find a couple of things actually, that our current character, something that right now we are very strong on, right? Something that your character would never wish to question. Something that is literally the opposite of your current version, right? We're going to go ahead and do the opposite of what we are right now, okay? And something that is completely out of character, the more outrageous, the better. And in this activity, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and identify 5 to 10, possibly more, things that our version 1.0 self would never do. Okay, so what we're going to do is down here inside of the worksheet, we're going to go ahead and just brainstorm 5 to 10 things that our version 1.0 self would never do. And then once we identify those 5 to 10 things, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and commit to doing one of those things immediately, right? Like right now, as soon as you do the worksheet, you're going to go ahead and do that thing immediately. So you can choose something that's kind of lighthearted, something that's easy to do. And then we're going to go ahead and pick 2 out of those 5 to 10 things. And we're going to go ahead and schedule to do 2 of those things sometime this week. Okay. So what we're going to do is, once you complete this activity, what you're going to do is you're actually going to comment twice inside of the Breaking Your Version 1.0 Identity community post. You're going to comment first what it is that you did right now and what you are committing to do sometime this week. And then once you actually do those other 2 things sometime this week, you're going to come back and reply back to your original comment. You're not going to make a new comment. You're going to reply back to your original comment inside of that post. And that reply to that original comment is going to go ahead and let us know what your experience was after completing those other 2 things. Okay, so make sure you reply, don't make a new comment, so that way it's all nice and organized and we can see your original comment, and then right underneath your original comment is going to be your reply on how everything went. Okay, now you might be thinking, Coach Yasin, how in the world am I going to think of some of these things? Well, the good news is we actually came up with a Breaking Your Version 1.0 Identity Bank. And really what this is, it's really just something to kind of get your ideas going about what sort of activities you could potentially do with this activity here, right? So here, go touch something that has a do not touch sign on it. See how it feels. Nothing too dangerous, right? Nothing illegal or anything like that. Playing hooky from everything, not picking up your phone from work, email, not making the bed. That's just an idea. Again, you don't have to pick from this bank. I want to emphasize that. This is just to kind of get your creative juices flowing that are going to be specific specific for you. Ultimately, the most powerful part of this activity is going to be when you choose something that is specific to you. This is not about choosing whatever feels the easiest from this list. It's going to be a matter of evaluating yourself, doing that first identifying your version 1.0 self activity, and then seeing, okay, this is who I currently am on this worksheet. I can see clearly who I am. And then you go ahead and say, okay, what is something that this person, who I am right now, would not want to do, right? And so ultimately the power of this activity is doing things that you yourself right now would never actually think of doing, and then being able to do that, right? Talking about an edgy subject that you normally wouldn't talk about, right? Something maybe about intimacy, politics, religion, something that you normally wouldn't talk about, and then allowing yourself to talk without a filter to somebody who's close to you or to a stranger. Donating some or all of your favorite snacks that your version 1.0 self clings to. Maybe donating some of your favorite clothes, shoes, or items that your version 1.0 self clings to. Again, this is not supposed to be easy. The point of this activity is to break that character. The next one on here says unfollow, unfriend, and unsubscribe all of the people on your main social media platform that you know are not serving you, right? All of those people that are reminders of your version 1.0 self. So picking Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, whatever is most beloved to you, and then going ahead and unsubscribing or unfollowing all of those people. Rearranging your entire bedroom format to something that you never actually thought of. If your version 1.0 self is very particular about the format of your bedroom. Again, remember, this is not to pick the easiest thing out of this list. It's to really honestly pick one of the hardest things and then go ahead and take it from there, right? Or being creative and figuring something out. Playing transportation roulette. I'm not going to go into this one here, but you can read through that when you download the actual activity. Dye your hair a crazy color or wear a funky wig for the day. What else we got on here? Going through the express lane with more than the maximum number of items and see how many you can get away with. Have a yes day and you just say yes to every opportunity that comes your way. Pulling a prank, turning your week into a game, getting a crazy haircut if your current identity really loves the hair that it has. Start wearing outlandish clothes or put on a funny outfit. Take a cold shower, brushing your teeth with your left hand, talking to 10 strangers, changing your phone number. All you got to do is call up your carrier and ask them to change your phone number. Decide to cut out certain people that remind you of your old identity and they no longer serve you. You can delete their phone number and either slowly choose to cut them out or just never talk to them again, your choice, depending on how aggressive you want to be. But again, remember, sky is the limit on this. Don't do anything illegal. Don't do anything like super crazy that you're getting in trouble for, but be creative, have fun with it, right? Be silly with it. And don't limit yourself to these ideas. They're only ideas to get you to be able to get those creative juices flowing, and really looking to see what students are willing to go out of the box and see what students come up with that are specific to their identity, right? You want to go ahead and do something that is specific to your identity and let us know why this specific thing was specific to your identity, right? And so whatever it is that you hold dear that is going to help you break your version 1.0 identity that you know you need to let go of in order for you to become your version 2.0 identity. Remember, sacrifice. If you don't sacrifice for your dreams will become the sacrifice. So approach it with that frame and have fun with it. So that way, ultimately, you can start to become the version of yourself that is going to allow you to be able to create the desired situation that you want. Now, I didn't say this in the beginning of this mini training, but also just like all of the other activities for this entire program, you are going to want to make sure that you go over to File, make a copy. You will not be able to edit or download this specific document. You will need to make your own copy of it. We cannot have thousands of students editing the same document. So make sure that you do make your own copy of it. So that way you can complete the Breaking Your Version 1.0 Identity activity. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop back over to the main training. All right, welcome back from the Breaking Your Version 1.0 Identity activity instructions and the mini training. That is going to be a very, very powerful training for you to make sure that you go through. And then in upcoming trainings, we're actually going to be doing the second half of this activity, and we're really going to start to define and design our dream life. We're going to start to design our 2.0 character that is going to effortlessly create this dream life. And so that's what's going to happen inside of the next training, because at the end of the day, we need this version 1.0 in order to be able to have the contrast to that version 2.0 that we are going into. Okay, so what I want to go ahead and do right now is I'm going to go ahead and flip it inside of this training. I know normally I do talk about the engagement question after the action steps, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about the first engagement question here before the action steps. And that's what I want to know from you inside of the comments of the post of this training. Is I would love to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from this training, right? We talked about a new way of seeing yourself. We talked about the seasons of life. We talked about the becoming process. What was your biggest takeaway from this training? And what are your thoughts on all of the things that we talked about, right? A new way of seeing yourself, the becoming process, the seasons of life. What are your thoughts on all of that? Okay, so that is the first thing I want to talk to you about. The second thing is we're going to go ahead and dive into the action steps. Now, for this training, there are quite a few action steps, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about the action steps secondarily, is because the very first action step that you're going to see underneath this training is you want to make sure that you completely watch this training. Once you do that, you can mark that off as complete. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to complete the student community engagement question, which is the one that we talked about above, okay? The third thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and complete the defining your version 1.0 self worksheet, okay? And then, and this is something that's new for this training because it's so important, you're going to comment on the defining your version 1.0 self worksheet student community post. So this is going to be a different separate post than the post for this training, okay? And the link for that is going to be in the action steps down below. And so for this training, you're going to actually have 3 different comments that you're going to do. The very first comment is going to be the normal engagement question comment. That was the one from above. And then the second one is going to happen after you complete the worksheet. And in that second comment, you're going to go ahead and let us know what was it like defining your version 1.0 self, right? What was your current version 1.0 self's Myers-Briggs personality test? What was it like seeing the character up in person that is responsible for creating your version 1.0 self and your version 1.0 situation, right? Seeing that from different angles. What was that like? So that is going to be the fourth action step that you do. The fifth action step that you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and complete the breaking your version 1.0 identity activity, the one that we talked about up above, okay? And then you're going to go ahead and do one of those activities immediately. That's going to be action step number 6, okay? And then action step number 7 is you're going to then comment on the breaking your version 1.0 identity post. So this is going to have a separate post. So this whole training actually has 3 different posts, okay? You have the post for the training, the post for the version 1.0 worksheet, and then you have another post for the breaking your version 1.0 identity activity as well, okay? And so what you're going to do is you're going to let us know in that comment, what did you decide to do right now to break your version 1.0, or what did you actually do because you should have done it immediately? And then you're going to let us know in the comment inside of that post as well, what are the 2 activities that you plan to do in the upcoming week? Now, once you go ahead and actually comment on that post, what you're then going to go ahead and do is action step number 8, is you're going to go ahead and complete the 2 activities over the course of the next week that are going to actually help you break your version 1.0 identity. And all of that's going to be talked about inside of the activity, right? And then this is the last action step. What you're going to do is you're actually going to reply. Okay, you're not going to make a new comment. You're going to reply back to your original comment from action step number 7. You're going to reply back to your original comment, and you're going to let us know how was your experience and what it felt like letting go of previous parts of your version 1.0 identity in order to make room for your version 2.0 identity, okay? So what you're going to do, again, remember, reply, don't make a new comment. You want to reply back to your original comment that is located inside of the post for the breaking your version 1.0 identity activity. So hope you can follow those instructions. It's going to be very important to make sure that you follow those instructions properly. And I know there's quite a few doozy of action steps inside of this training. Now, the last thing I want to go ahead and talk about inside of this training is I want you to audit yourself. Is there a voice in your head that is whispering at you yet, right? Is that voice saying, hey, Coach Yassine, what does any of this have to do with making money, right? Why can't we just jump to the sales and the marketing already, right? My previous career experience gave me the skills that are going to allow me to be very, very good at this. I'm ready to go ahead and jump to the money-making part already. Now, hear me very carefully. I promise you, if the money-making tactics were the only thing that was missing for you to be able to make the income and the money that you want, you would already be making it. The reason you are not making the kind of income that you want right now is because you are not that person yet, okay? And so what we are doing here inside of this training and the last few trainings inside of this module is we are setting the foundations for you not just to be able to make a couple $1,000s a month. What we are doing is we are setting the foundations inside of this module for you to be able to make $20, $30, $40, $50, $100,000 a month. I myself go through these trainings regularly in order to make sure that I can constantly evolve myself in the seasons of life, okay? This is very important. And my income at this point is on pace to surpass more than $300,000 a month, $3 million a year. One of my mentors does these exact same activities in his business, and his business is on pace to pass $4 million a month, aka $40 million a year. Okay. And so there are levels to this. There's seasons to this. And so when we are doing these activities, if we are still doing them, why is that voice in your head so quick to want to rush, right? Maybe there's something that you're missing here, right? Maybe it's time to question your beliefs and your reality and really start to slow down and do the work properly and not rush, okay? And that's just food for thought. I just want to go ahead and let you know of this so that way you actually take your time on this. It's not something that you're rushing through and say, hey, I got to get to the money-making skills because I'm ready primed for this. Trust me, it's not the money-making tactic. It's who you are, and these trainings are going to go ahead and cement that for you so that way you can become somebody who can have the income, the impact, and the freedom that you want inside of your life, okay? So with that being said, make sure that you do the action steps, make sure you complete them in full, make sure you do them properly, and not half-ass them, because if you half-ass them, you're going to get a half-assed result. With that being said, I will catch you in the next training.